He is the new star of the Delaware Republican Party and the new state treasurer. We talk with Ken Simpler about the state finances and his future. This is the Delaware Way. I'm Larry Menti. Welcome to the Delaware Way. We are proud to be joined by Ken Simpler, who is I think we can still say new, right?
It sure feels new to me, yeah.
The new state treasurer from Delaware, and the only non-incumbent Republican to win statewide office in well over a decade, 2 decades, I think, at this point. So I want to talk more about that, how exactly you did that in your political future in the next segment. But let's deal with the financial health and stability of the state of Delaware, which is your primary job. The DFAC numbers are going to be coming out very soon, which is going to play heavily into the state budget, which will come out in June. The DFAC numbers show you expected revenue for the state. Is that fair to say? Do you have any inclination of where those DFAC numbers are going to put the state?
No, and they will not be far off the last forecast. The reality is we do these every month now as we approach the end of a legislative session, so they won't be far off the past forecast in all likelihood. But one of the committees I've been recently assigned to in my first 100 days is to study the issue of the volatility of our revenues. There is a concern that the portfolio revenues that we have, the individual pieces, that some of them have become much more difficult to predict, much more volatile. And so one of the things we're studying is just this mix of revenues we have, and is there a different set of choices we could make about that mix that would produce a forecast that I could sit here and tell you with confidence what it's going to be. But right now we are subject to some very narrow bases in our tax system that can move around quite a bit. So they're very hush-hush in the Division of Revenue about putting those numbers out before the date. So next Monday, I think, is when we'll first hear them or see them.
What you keep hearing is a $47 million shortfall from last year. Is that true? Is there some truth to that?
That was the way our budgeting system works is the DFAC produces an estimate at the beginning of the state's fiscal year, which is back in July. And really, I think where the December estimate is what's used by the governor to put his budget together. So the governor, when he prepares his budget in January, has to be cognizant of what the forecast was by DFAC in December, and we can't appropriate more than 98% of that forecast. Well, as that December forecast moves, when we meet in March, when we meet in April, when we meet in May, et cetera, in theory, there's a 2% cushion there. 98% we're allowed to appropriate out of 100% of the forecast. But if we move outside that range, then obviously you have to look at some of the elements in the budget. And whenever the number goes down, it causes great angst in Dover, naturally.
You would think that given those dire predictions for the DFAC and for the budget, that's going to affect regular Delawareans negatively over the next year, unless the tax base is broadened and deepened. We just had a politician here a second ago who called it revenue enhancers. They're talking about tax increases. Does Delaware necessarily, because of this shortfall, have to look at revenue enhancers or tax increases?
Yes and no. I wouldn't say because of this shortfall, right? Because, $45 million is a lot of money, and it's a lot of money to fix in a particular budget year, but you got to realize the state of Delaware spends $8 billion a year. So $45 million as a percentage is a very small amount. But longer term, what we really have to wrestle with is when you look at the 20-year trend, when you look at the 40-year trend of where we've been, there's sort of a narrowing of our tax base. You pick the source: personal income taxes, corporate income taxes, gross receipts taxes. Some of the main taxes we rely upon, we have over time, the base, the payers, the number of people paying has gotten narrower, and our rates have gotten higher. That has competitive implications for the state of Delaware when people look around as to where to form a business or where to settle or where to retire. It also has implications for the volatility of that base. When it gets narrower, it can move around even a little bit, produces a $45 million number. So you want a broader base in the sense that revenue enhancers usually mean you're increasing taxes. But what we want to look at in the state of Delaware is not necessarily increasing or decreasing. That's a decision for our General Assembly. But the committee that I'm part of is trying to study our revenue mix and say, is there a way we could really compose our revenue mix differently, not raise or lower, but that would be more stable, it would be more predictable, and that over time would grow with a greater degree of confidence to match the service levels that we provide to our people? That's sort of a different question.
I do. I understand the difference, but you said that $47 million doesn't seem like a lot, given the overall spending of the state, unless it affects your program, unless it affects your grant.
Don't mistake me. $47 million is a lot of money, and it's a lot of money to find in a particular budget year, is what I think I said. Over the course of a long haul, we'd like to think that we could reduce the volatility of that base, but $47 million, if it turns out that we have to solve that amount by shrinking the current level of appropriations, yeah, that's going to cause a lot of problems in the General Assembly.
When we come back, as I promised, I do want to talk a little politics, if that's okay, and especially how you exactly did what you did. The fact that you are the last Republican standing, it seems, in Delaware right now. When we return with Ken Simpler, the Delaware State Treasurer, on the Delaware Way.